name's Liz Thompson, and I am coming to you today from Vancouver, BC, on the west coast of Canada. And I have an interesting little project to share with you today. What we're going to do is all those little scraps of thread that we seem to collect with every project that we make. Those little pieces of thread, most of us will chop them off our project and throw them in the garbage. And of course, where that eventually ends up is, in most cases, the landfill. So we're obviously trying to be as eco-friendly as we can. So today I'm going to show you one thing that you can do with those scraps of fabric. So first and foremost, you're going to need to collect some scraps in order to make this project. And you will be amazed at how quickly you're going to be able to collect those scraps. So I would suggest you have a little container, a little plastic container or a bowl of some sort, even a little basket next to your machine. And each time you clip your threads, whether you're sewing or whether you're embroidering, just clip them and throw them in that little container. And very quickly you're going to have quite a collection of threads. What I did yesterday was I tidied up a little and I went through all my bobbins. And if you're at all like me, when you come to the very close to the end of a bobbin and your machine, if you have a machine that tells you that your bobbin is running low and you don't want the hassle of running out of bobbin thread right in the middle of a project, you will stop at that point, you will take the bobbin out, and if you're like me, you'll just toss it in a little drawer underneath the sewing table. And so of course I have a collection of bobbins with just a little bit of thread in them. So what I did yesterday was I collected those bobbins together and I pulled off or reeled off all the thread that was on those bobbins, and I didn't care whether it was cotton or polyester or rayon, whatever. I just collected, reeled those all off and put them in that little container. Then I went through my drawers where I have thread, and I noticed that I had quite a few spools of thread that really had not much thread left on them. So I thought, okay, time to clear up and get rid of those spools, because I'm not really going to be able to do a project of any great size with just, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 inches of stitching with the thread that was left on those spools. So I reeled those all off as well. And then my eye caught onto the fact that I had some spools of metallic thread. One of them was, well, not one of them, there were several, that was sulky hollow shimmer, which is actually not a thread. It's a kind of like a holographic foil ribbon, obviously very thin, wound onto spools. And I have calculated that I probably had those spools for over 15 years. And if I can count up the number of times that I may have used that thread or hollow shimmer in the last 15 years, or even let's be conservative and say in the last 10 years, I don't think I would get past 2 or 3 fingers. So I thought, you know what, time. So I reeled all that off and put that in my little bowl or my container. So I now have a really sizable collection of thread to show you the little project for today. So without further ado, we are going to move to the machine and I'm going to share with you how you set up to use all that thread. So here we are again at the machine, and I have got, let me just cut the threads on that, and here we have a collection of thread that I was telling you that I had reeled off yesterday. And here in fact is my container. I wonder if you can see that. Maybe you can see it better there. It is a little stained glass container, and have a look at all the yummy threads that I reeled off old spools and bobbins yesterday. It took a bit of time, but you know what, it was time, and I think every now and again it's really a good thing to go through our drawers, our sewing drawers, and find bits and pieces that we really don't use anymore. Okay, so what I'm going to do is show you a piece of stabilizer. Now, this stabilizer is wash away stabilizer, and that is what you're going to need. Not tear away, not cut away, not heat away. It must be wash away. So if you look at the corner here of my stabilizer, you will see that I have taken this little piece of paper that is actually adhered to the back of my water-soluble stabilizer, and I have folded it back. So I am now going to peel off and put that paper backing to one side, and I am going to put my stabilizer down onto the bed of my machine, which is my table for right now. And then this stabilizer is sticky. All right, so that is why I chose to use that. Of course, your water-soluble stabilizer does not need to be sticky. However, if you are just using regular wash-away stabilizer and it has no way of kind of corralling and holding these threads in place, you might want to spray just a little bit of fabric adhesive spray onto that stabilizer. But in this instance, I'm using the sticky wash-away stabilizer, and so I'm not worrying too much with that. And then what you're going to need to do is take another sheet of the same stabilizer, and you are going to lay it on top of the thread. Now, you don't need to worry too much if you have little bits of thread sticking out of the sandwich. You can take your fingers and just pop that thread back into the sandwich as best you can, but if it sticks out a little, it's not the end of the world, because what you can do is just collect together all those little bits of thread that you trim off later, and then you can use them in a future project. So I'm taking my big jumbo clips right now, and I'm just putting them all the way around my little sandwich, basically just as an extra, holding it all together, holding my sandwich of 2 sheets of water-soluble stabilizer and my thread together. And then I need to put my foot back on the machine, and I have got, I'm using my trusty FAF electronic machine, and I'm using the built-in walking foot, and in the top of the machine I have, or in other words in the needle, I have a rayon embroidery thread. I like that little bit of luster or shininess, but it doesn't have to be. You could just as easily put into the needle of the machine, you could thread up the needle with cotton thread or polyester sewing thread. I just happen to be using rayon embroidery thread. In my bobbin, which is below the bed of the machine, I have got, I believe it's like a variegated rayon thread that I just happen to have on a bobbin, and I thought, you know what, the colors will work. Now, there are many ways to actually get this sandwich sewn together. I am choosing right now to show you a method where I'm just using my sewing machine. And the main reason that I'm doing that for the first part of this project is because not everybody has got an embroidery machine. Another way of sewing this all together would be to hoop this up in the hoop of an embroidery machine and then digitize a pattern of stitches that would stitch and hold this all together. I have done that, and I will show you that in a future video. However, we're just going to use the decorative stitches on the machine. Of course, I could use a straight stitch, but I'm going to be here all afternoon stitching straight stitches to cover this entire area. So it'll go a little quicker if I have a decorative stitch and make that stitch as wide as my machine will allow. And I believe that the widest width on this FAF machine, which I bought many years ago, and it still works beautifully, my maximum width is 6 millimeters. So it's not awfully wide. If you have a machine that's 7 millimeters or 9 millimeters, obviously you're going to fill up and cover this area with decorative stitches quicker than I would be able to do it. However, if your machine is 5 millimeter wide, doesn't matter, you can still do this project. So I've got the machine threaded up, I've got my sandwich prepared, and I'm going to put my presser foot down and I am going to start stitching. Now the stitch that I have chosen is a sort of a swirly serpentine stitch, and it stitches fairly close together. I have the settings on the machine are 6 millimeters wide and 1.5 millimeters in length, which means my stitches are fairly close together, which is kind of what I want, because what I'm now doing is I am sewing all that thread together in a bundle between my 2 layers of wash away stabilizer. Obviously my stabilizer is going to wash away later. All right, so there is my first row of stitching. Now you could have a whole pattern and grid going with this stitching if you so chose, but I'm not. I'm just going to stitch randomly here and there, and obviously it's going to take quite a while to cover this entire piece or this entire sandwich with decorative stitches, but that's okay. And I'm going to start taking some of the clips off because I don't want to ride into those clips. And at some point, when I have sort of stabilized it in the middle, I am going to turn and I'm going to start sewing right around the edge of my sandwich. Now, I discovered when I was practicing for this video, I discovered that this particular sewing machine does not like to sew in fresh air. And I'm kind of used to another machine that it's got a jam-proof bobbin system, and it doesn't mind sewing in fresh air. Every time I did it with this machine, the thread broke. So I now know I cannot go off my piece of water-soluble stabilizer because this machine, the thread will break immediately. So I'm keeping onto the water-soluble stabilizer. And I think you can see the stitch that I chose now that it's been stitching a little. All right, so as I say, I'm going to go all the way around the edge of my water-soluble stabilizer, and that would be almost like baking a pie. And when you put the pastry around your filling, you're going to then pinch the edges of the pastry to close your pie. Well, that in a sense is what I'm doing right now as I'm going around all the way around the edge of my sandwich, and I'm removing those jumbo clips which I had in place just for a short while, and you will notice that there are some threads sticking out here. So what I can do is I can stop and I can just push them into the sandwich a little if I want, but if I don't, it's not the end of the world, because as I said, you're going to cut those little pieces off with your rotary cutter at the end when your sewing is done, and then you are going to use those scraps for your next project. In essence, what we are doing is we are making our own new piece of fabric from the scraps of thread. And it's just hooked onto a thread there, so I just need to break that thread so it doesn't pull. And so I mentioned that another way, instead of using your decorative stitches on your machine to sew this little sandwich together, you could also use your embroidery machine. But if you don't have an embroidery machine and you feel that it's a little tedious here to be using your decorative stitches and going backwards and forwards, round and about, which you're going to have to do quite a bit of, I'll show you the one that I did before this video, and it took me probably, it's about the same size as this, and it probably took me about 25-30 minutes to cover it with stitching. So really, in the big scheme of things, it didn't take me a long time. But what about if you think, oh, that's just too tedious, I'm not going to do that? Well, you can set up your machine for free motion quilting. In other words, you're going to drop your feed dogs, you're going to put your darning or your free motion foot onto the machine, and then you're just going to free motion the heck out of your sandwich. And that will actually go quite a lot quicker than this stitching. Because here, the feed dogs are moving my sandwich through the machine. Alright, so you've got 3 different ways of stitching this sandwich. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take that out of the machine, and I'm going to show you the sandwich that I completed. It's actually probably a little bigger than the sandwich. I thought it was about the same size, slightly narrower, but it's a little longer than the one we've just been sewing on. And on this one, I used a combination of several different decorative stitches just because I could. And several times during the stitching, I ran out of bobbin thread. So if I should take it over to the back, you'll see that quite a lot of it is fairly, not invisible, but it's not showing terribly well because I chose a sort of soft gold, creamy sort of color thread. And then I had this variegated orange and yellow thread, and I do believe that was it. And you can see the decorative stitches quite clearly on the back. Now, that's going to be the back of my piece of fabric. This is the front. So what I'm going to now do is I'm going to move my camera so that you can see what I'm doing here. Let me bring a towel, because it would be disastrous if I spilt water and it went anywhere near my sewing machine. So what I've done is I put a towel on the table, and I have got a bowl of just regular tap water. It doesn't have to be hot. It just came out of the cold tap of my machine, of my sink. And so I'm now going to take this, because I have stitched as much stitching on this as I want, and I'm going to put it into this bowl of water. And the idea being that I'm going to squish it around a little. There's a lot of stitching here, so it may take a little bit of squishing and a little bit of soaking to get all that water-soluble stabilizer out. But I don't know if you can see it, but the water has gone a little milky, and as I'm squishing it in the water, I'm actually feeling that it is a little gluey, and that of course is the water-soluble stabilizer part. And sometimes people just leave it there and they leave it overnight to soak, but obviously we're not going to watch me squish it together and leave it overnight to soak. So I know that not all the water-soluble stabilizer is out at this point, has dissolved and floated away. However, I'm going to open up this piece of fabric, and ooh la la, is that not glittery? And that, of course, a lot of that is the hollow shimmer, sort of metallic ribbon that I was telling you that I had reeled off those spools yesterday. So there's gold and there's silver and there's a metallic-y blue, together with a lot of my gold thread stitching. It wasn't a metallic gold. I started actually with a spool of metallic gold thread, but it kept breaking, and I thought, you know what, this is too, I'm not interested in fussing. So the thread that I actually used in the end was this gold color, and I do believe, I'm just trying to, it's a Jenny Haskins embroidery thread, in a sort of gold color, but it's not a gold metallic. It's a rayon embroidery thread. So there you go. There I have my fabric that I have made, and you will see that it is quite durable. I can pull on it and it's not tearing because it has been nicely reinforced and sewn together with all those stitches. And I do believe that if you had if you used this technique and you did it on a long skinny piece, it would make rather an attractive and very unique scarf. I would then definitely keep away from scratchy metallic threads and stick to soft yarns and soft threads like rayon and cotton. But Liz, what are you going to do with this little piece of fabric that you have made? Well, number one is I'm going to put it back into the water and rinse it some more to get the gluiness out, because my hands are all sticky with the gluiness from the water soluble now. So that, of course, will be job number one. But what am I going to do with this fabric? Well, let me tell you that what I am going to do is I am going to use it to make, seeing as it's come out so glittery and sparkly, I'm going to use it to make myself a bag. And this bag I made many years ago. I can't even remember how long I've had it. And you will see the threads that are here is mainly sort of teals and blues and a little bit of gold tucked in there. And these threads were actually from my serger thread drawer. And my threads had gotten to a terrible tangle, and there was this giant bird's nest of all these threads. So I cut them off, all the spools, and wound my spools properly and secured the threads, and then I used this to make a piece of fabric, and there it is on one side and turning it over to the other side. So it was a sizable piece of fabric, and I then sewed it into a bag with two sort of elongated ovals on each end of the bag to give it a little bit of capacity or volume. And it has a zipper at the top. I obviously just put a little bit of fiber fill in the zipper at this point so that you could see the bag with a little bit of stuffing in it, as though I had goods in it. And then the strap for my bag was actually, I didn't have any chain or cord that I wanted to use at the time, but I did have fusible bias tape in gold and black. So I took those two and ironed them together, and then used that as the cord for my bag. And I have used this bag quite a few times, and I guarantee you that whenever I use it, people come up to me and say, "What's that? How did you do that? Where did you get that?" So obviously, with my new piece of fabric that's awfully glittery here, I kind of figured that in a previous life I must have been a magpie, because I do love glittery, shiny things. So there we are. That is the bag that I intend to make at some point, and when I have made it, I will definitely post that on my social media pages. And in the meantime, can I encourage you to start collecting your little scraps of thread, and you too can make a bag or some other little project. Maybe you want to sew it into a pin cushion, maybe you want to sew it into a pocket for a jacket, or pockets for a jacket. It would be quite striking. So here I am back again, just to thank you for watching my video today about how to use up your thread scraps, and I hope that you got some inspiration and ideas from that. And also just to remind you that I have an Instagram page, I have a Facebook page. My Instagram page is Sew and Learn with Liz, Sew Quilt Learn with Liz, and I have a website as well, that is sewwithliz.com, and all these details will be below the video. You can see them there, and I have a Facebook page, and I also have a Facebook group for support. So let's say, for example, you had a question arising from the class today. You are more than welcome to put a comment below this video, and I will definitely be monitoring those comments and replying. But if you wanted to, you could go to my Facebook group, which is Sew with Liz Thompson, Sew and Learn with Liz Thompson, I believe. And it is an open group, so you don't have to answer 20 questions to be entered into the group or allowed to join the group. You can come there and you can put your questions, you can share your projects with me. I would love to see any projects that you've made using this technique, using your thread snippets. And of course, you can, as I said earlier, you can chop up bits of fabric and bits of yarn and tulle and chiffon organza, all of those sort of things can also be put into your personal, unique fabric. So once again, thank you so much for listening today, and see you again soon on another Sew with Liz video.